How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. My goodness, what a turnout. Oh my gosh. Wow, this is so fantastic to look out and see such a wonderful cross-section of our community, everybody coming together. It is such a pleasure to see you here tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out of your busy schedules in your summer to make it here. I'm Jenna Palacio. I'm the Executive Director of the Tahoe Regional Young Professionals, and it is my pleasure to be your moderator this evening. Just to kind of give you a little rundown of how this will work, it is our pleasure on behalf of TRIP to offer a civic engagement branch of our organization. TRIP is a nonprofit serving the entire Lake Tahoe Basin, and our nonprofit status is your heads up that we are a politically neutral party organization. We do not endorse ballot initiatives, candidates, anything like that, but it is absolutely our prerogative to be a platform of information, which is exactly why we are having this event tonight to serve up an opportunity for us to all have a conversation about something that's impacting all of us. Whether it be directly or indirectly. So just some ground rules for tonight. This is not going to be your father's Tahoe Town Hall event. We are live streaming. So thanks to our partners at Tahoe Production House. We appreciate your support. And for those of you watching at home, welcome, or maybe at the office if you're still burning the midnight oil there. You know, this is the Tahoe Regional Young Professionals. This is a professional event. And just as it's live streamed, you know, just pretend like your mom's at home watching. Ready to watch your language. I'll do the same. And the way this event's going to flow is we wanted to lay down some information on affordable housing. And we have such a fantastic panel here tonight that I'll be introducing shortly. So we'll hear from them first with with a brief question and answer session with them before we open it up to the public. Fair enough? Shall we dive? All right, great. So, you know, it's an interesting conversation, affordable housing. And it could get kind of heated, and I mean, even just now we were talking about, you know, what is affordable housing? Is it, you know, low-income housing? Is it, you know, the fact that we're saying goodbye to people that can't find a place here? Is it an issue with our available rental products? You know, what is it? So the answer is, it's everything. You know, this is something that's a very complex topic. So we're going to peel away those layers and look at them one by one and look at the different tiers of affordable housing, not just here at a local level, but what's available through the state and federal programs. So affordable housing, as defined by the state, is homes that cost 30% of a household's income before taxes. So that's the textbook definition, although we know it goes so much more than that. And I see Nancy Furlier-Brown. We'll dive into that more in a minute here. So let's take a look at what affordable housing is not, okay? Affordable housing is not motel rooms. These are lodging units, and I don't know if you could read this here, but it says Tahoe's favorite rental source. This is not a solution for a family to have housing. Also, affordable housing is not an out-of-date, not up to code, yet often adorable historic cabin. You know, we like to think of housing as habitable, something that a family could live in and be comfortable and warm in the winter with, you know, insulation that's up to code, for example. Affordable housing is also not dilapidated trailers. We have a few of those here in South Lake Tahoe, and I'm sure for those of you watching at home or beyond or live in other communities around the lake, I'm sure this is a scene that, you know, you're familiar with as well. And you know, I personally am really excited about the opportunity of affordable housing serving as bringing in new environmentally sound buildings to our community as well. So it's a lot of what affordable housing is, and it's a lot about what affordable housing isn't. So we'll all take a dive into that together tonight. Some interesting stats that came up in a recent affordable housing meeting. Median household income for affordable housing is $30,000. So we're talking about a family surviving on that. 50% spend
Tax or after tax?
after tax. It's their gross income.
And it's to the size of the family.
Depends on your family size.
Okay.
Family size, yeah.
Okay. We also found in a recent study that 25% of the community that was surveyed in North Shore was considered extremely low income. So we know that there is, a part of our population a large part of our population that needs this addressed soon. 21% are considered low income, and 42% live in overcrowded conditions. So it's good that we're having this conversation and taking a look at, how our community is living and what we can do to fix it. Let's see here. Oops. Great. So moving forward, it's my pleasure to introduce our panel tonight. Susan Simon with Simon Consulting is here. Thank you so much for joining us. Nancy Carey, City Manager of South Lake Tahoe. Glad you're here tonight. Mark Irving, it's a pleasure to have you. Mark's here from the urban housing communities, and he has some great insight from a very broad perspective. And I'm looking forward to hearing about that soon. Heidi Hildrum with the Tahoe Prosperity Center. Thank you so much for joining us. Sarah Schrick from the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation. I know you guys have been working hard on the affordable housing and community impact issues up in North Shore, so thank you for your insight. And Nick Haven from the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Thank you for being here. And this is truly speaking to the collaborative efforts that need to happen here. Not one agency can solve this alone. And I know that there's many different agencies that have solutions in place, and I'm so glad that we can all come together tonight and talk about them. So, we have some questions for you all. But before we dive into those, just everybody watching at home, you can live tweet, follow us with the hashtag Tahoe Town Hall. You can also find us on Instagram, Tahoe Trip, Tahoe TRYP. We're on Facebook, Tahoe Regional Young Professionals. We're on Twitter at Tahoe Trip. And most importantly, you could always find us at TahoeTRYP.org. So, yeah, there you go. All right, so Sarah, we'd like to kick it off and ask you just some basic, just kind of an overview. Why does the Tahoe region have a housing crisis? And what are some of the causes? And if you can speak into the microphone, make sure that you're speaking directly into it so our folks listening at home can hear. We good? We on?
It's on, okay. Well, the study that we did in Truckee, North Tahoe really was about collecting baseline data that we can sort of understand some of the trends that are contributing to the problem and that we can address or come up with some solutions to address them. So we have a housing crisis pretty simply because there aren't enough housing units for the people who are here. And there are a limited number of spaces to build new units. More and more of our existing housing stock is unavailable to the workforce. Primarily it's held for vacation use, and we see that trend getting stronger. There's a mismatch of local incomes to the housing stock and the prices there. I think we all can see that. There's also a decline in our purchasing power over time while housing costs continue to rise, making it even more dramatic. There's also a real mismatch, like you said, between the types of housing that are available and the people who need to use those houses. So most of the housing stock that we have is single-family residential. A lot of it was built before 1979. And a lot of that is not really suitable for households with 2 or 3 people in them. So there's also a lot of red tape, and that can be in a variety of different ways, and those are some policies and things that we think can be aligned with some collaboration. But that's kind of at the root of what we saw from our study.
I see, yeah, and you did a recent study on, was it just on housing solutions, or?
The study itself was really meant, like I said, to gather some baseline data about the housing that we have and the demographics in our community. And then the idea is to come up with a series of solutions and ideas that we then can work together in a group, in a collaborative way, to create an action plan of solutions to address them.
Excellent, thank you, thank you. And Mark, adding to that, can you just give us a brief overview of some of the affordable housing projects that your company has worked on and developed?
Well, before I answer that, the question really is, what is affordable housing? And we were talking about that earlier. I work in a very defined bandwidth, and that is I provide housing to people that make 30 to 60% of area median income. It varies in every county, every city, it's different. But that's where I focus on in trying to solve the problem. It's not to say that the tools that we have to finance projects, we can't also address the housing stock at higher levels. I guess the true answer to affordable housing is what you can afford. That's affordable. Anything above that, everybody in this room can say they can't afford the house on the lake, but they can afford the house that's half as the size and a mile away. Maybe that's the case. Anyway, but we develop projects throughout California and Hawaii. We have 20 in operation. They range from ones that are close to the beach to ones in the mountains, Southern California and Northern California. The sizes vary. The population is multifamily and senior, so it's a wide swath.
I see. And has your company ever considered developing affordable housing here in the Tahoe Basin?
Yes, we were up here, and I want to say it was about 2009. And if we all go back to 2009, we all know how the world was at that time. Throughout California, it was difficult to develop affordable housing. Not that there wasn't an abundance of available project sites, but the tools that we do utilize, and primarily that is the low-income housing tax credit program. Well, the people that buy the tax credits are typically banks, and they did a very good job of having their own losses. They didn't need to have tax credits hit their balance sheet. So we had a dramatic reduction in the value of the tax credits, which meant that you needed additional soft funding from the local sources. We did meet with Nancy. I think she was the RDA director at the time. And we had a site, and I think it was good for about 38 units. But I believe ultimately the funding that we were asking for that project went to the Aspens, so it went to a different affordable housing project. So I guess that goes back, probably goes to the forefront of it takes money to build affordable housing, any housing. And so we'll, I'm sure, get involved in that conversation a bit later on.
Good. Yeah, we need it. So kind of continuing this economic impact conversation, Heidi, we wanted to check in with you. How does the region's economy impact the issue of affordable housing? Oh, yes. I'll do a better job with
That's okay, sorry, no, that's good. So the Tahoe Prosperity Center has been around just for a few years, and our organization completed the Measuring for Prosperity report, which is available on our website, and you can download all 70-ish pages, or there's a handout out front that has some of the highlights. But basically, this report was an economic study for our region of economic trends as well as community demographic data. Mm-hmm. And the primary revenue source for our $5 billion regional economy is tourism, which is, I'm sure, not surprising to any of you. But typically with tourism economies, you have lower wages, more seasonal natures of jobs, so you tend to have lower wage positions, and you also tend to have higher housing costs due to second home ownerships rates being higher than average in other communities. So those two factors, you're sort of hit on both the supply side and the demand side in a tourism-based economy.
I see. I see. So how can economic development really be used to address affordable housing? We could probably have our own town hall event just on that
That's
alone.
true. We could. In a nutshell, very creatively. So the way that our organization is approaching it is there are many organizations like the El Dorado Community Foundation, the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation, and our government agencies that should and are collaborating on housing. our organization has a workforce project. So we're focused currently on economic development that will allow businesses here already to grow and expand, to add higher wage, more year-round benefited positions to their employee base, to link up those seasonal jobs so that maybe someone works outside in the summer and then they have a different job in the winter, but they have more certainty with those seasonal jobs. So there's a variety of solutions that we can be working on in our community. And then also workforce attraction. We're already seeing some innovative entrepreneurial spirit happening in the region, and those bring with them typically higher wage jobs. The front page of the Tribune this morning, Chris McNamara and Corey Rich are just a perfect example of the wonderful things happening in our community right now that's related to economic development.
Yeah, big things happening. Excellent. So, Susan, we wanted to check in with you and see what affordable housing projects in Tahoe have you been involved with? I know you work with a consultancy. Can you tell us a little bit about those projects that you've worked on?
Yes, I work on,
And speak into the, yeah.
mic to mic. I hate this. I work on the type of projects that Mark puts together. So I've worked on Lake Vista, which is up by TRPA, Meadowbrook Apartments, and the Domus, the legendary Domus project on North Shore, the Scattered Sites project. So, yeah, those are.
Okay.
The,
So there are affordable housing projects
oh
that
yeah,
have been
there's
implemented.
actually
and
there's several out there. So I think Nancy has a whole list of what has been permitted and exists in the basin.
And so with what would you consider the successes and challenges of those projects?
Well, they all ended up being successes because they were built and they're full right now. I think there's waiting lists. I know there is for Domus.
Wow.
And for most of the projects down in South Shore, I heard for the Aspens, there's a 6-year waiting list.
Oh my goodness.
So, that demonstrates a huge need. The challenges, yes, there's challenge with the permitting, and that's my area that I work on. However, with Domus, we worked through a lot of that through code amendments to TRPA code for height and density and things like that, and I think some of that carried over and is now in the new area plans, the town center and the Tahoe Valley plan, where the city in particular wants to focus the housing because that has the incentive. So if you're talking with low-income housing, there are some incentives there. There's things like the bonus units and that help to get this stuff permitted. It's when you get up more into like the workforce housing is when, the incentives aren't there and it's more expensive, and with the resources, which is another conversation, those are expensive, to get residential units to build, multifamily housing. And so it just doesn't, economically, it doesn't make sense to a developer at this point to do workforce. But for the low income, there are things in place, so.
I see. So it sounds like a barrier. Would you see that?
For the workforce, it is more of a barrier, but for the low income, I think there's a misnomer out there that people think it's impossible because of height and density and things like that, but the new regional plan looked at some of those issues, and the area plans have addressed some of that, so.
I see. And we'll definitely be checking in with you, Mark, on the regional plan in just a moment. Excuse me, Nick. So Nancy, we're talking about plans that are in place, and we know that there are barriers. What solutions can the city put in place to address the housing crisis?
Okay, well, there's a variety of solutions, but I do want to tap into a couple things that have been said. I do have a list of what solutions the city has already put together. The city has 455 affordable housing units. Now, when we talk about government affordable housing, that's subsidized by something, as Mark was explaining, a developer, and as Susan was saying, a developer can't come in and build housing that's affordable for low income because it's too expensive to build here. So the government has to subsidize that. We subsidize that through grants and through redevelopment. But after the dissolution of redevelopment, we don't have those dollars anymore. So most of these units that I'm talking about, I do have a handout for folks, were built during the era of redevelopment. They were built primarily over the last 10 years. The Aspens project was the last one that was built. We've spent about $30 million in redevelopment dollars to build that. That's just the government side, the city side. Of course, there was state funding coming in from Prop 1 and other propositions. That money is also gone. There's $1 billion that the state is looking at right now to put into the budget. You see that new legislation coming out. We'll see if the governor signs that. If that money comes out, then it does provide opportunities for solutions on the funding side. But these units are for those that make government-restricted incomes. So in El Dorado County, so that we know what we're talking about, the median income, and that's not the average, that's the middle point, is $69,400 under HUD's 2016 limits. So that means on a family of 3, then low income is $55,000. So you couldn't qualify for any of these if your family made more than that. But most of them are for very low income or extremely low, which means you're below about $35,000 a year. So that income group has some solutions that have been put in place. That's just in the city. There's some all over the basin. What I do want to commend Tahoe Truckee on their study. You should really look at it. It's an incredible study in getting that baseline data out. In terms of solutions on low income and affordable income, there's grants and there's some tax dollars out there, but those properties have to be subsidized by the taxpayers somehow, and then they have to be redistributed to others, which is limited by income. So then you're really talking about other solutions on workforce. And that is a little bit of what Sarah was talking about. It's the supply and demand. We're always going to have a very limited supply and a high demand for folks who want to buy a home in really what I would argue is the most beautiful place on earth. So there's always going to be a high demand. So we have an issue that is limited. We're not going to just build tracts of homes to meet that demand. We do have commodities that limit it. Susan was talking about in terms of how can we get those properties, and I was recently talking with some folks at TRPA, maybe a solution might be to identify where some affordable, workforce affordable, so that's above the median, so people making over $55,000 a year, where could they afford? Well, we'd have to identify parcels that could then put those commodities on those parcels and say, this would be an area in which we would allow a certain number of housing units. The environmental studies would have to be done. Those would probably have to be funded by the government because private sector is not going to pay for that. They would not be able to afford it, to sell it for people making $50,000 a year, as the Tahoe Truckee study shows. Those incomes, and that good article out of, Paula did a great article on South Tahoe Now the other day, it shows these incomes, that income is not going to be able to afford that middle price home. So to bring that middle price home down, the government's going to have to step in to find some solutions to reduce those costs, which is permitting, commodities, and the parcels.
When you say government, are you talking at a state or federal level?
Well, the state and the federal, although the federal government through HUD provides a lot of the solutions I just mentioned. Those,
HUD is Housing and Urban Development.
right, and so the HUD provides funding to state, and then the states and the cities have to compete for those grants I described. So while $1 billion might sound like a lot of money, we all compete, and our little city has to compete. And when we compete for those dollars, we show we need affordable housing in our town, but we're competing with cities like Fresno. They really need affordable housing. Most of their folks are making under $30,000. We compete for those funds. So on the state side and federal, those are really the same dollars.
I just saw that that Truckee got $8 million in HUD funding last year.
Yes, so that's what I'm talking
We've
about.
got a
We've
fighting
received a
chance
lot
here,
of
guys.
money, but you have to have a really great study. That's why her study, this Tahoe Truckee study, is so important. Once you have those studies and demonstrate what your income is, you're still competing on an equal basis for similar sized cities. So they'll have a small city pool and a big city pool. So that's the state federal side. What I meant by the government stepping in is really TRPA is going to have to look at some solutions on the housing units, residential units of use, on everything that's required to develop a parcel. It's very, very expensive, and that's what prohibits both commercial and economic development as well as housing. It's the same thing on the economic side. That is a barrier to bringing those that revenue in to build those products.
This is great because we have somebody from the TRPA that can speak
So
to
Nick?
this. Mark, do you want
Imagine
to?
that.
Nick, do you want to chime
Yeah,
in on what the
absolutely.
TRPA's role is?
No, I
and-
think everyone kind of spoke for me, what the changes we've made in the
Speak into
regional
that mic.
plan. We definitely have learned from some of the affordable housing projects that have gone on over the years. And the 2012 regional plan made some of those adjustments. Like affordable housing actually doesn't need an allocation. Yeah. So there are things that I think TRPA has stepped up and done. And we're also solution oriented and are open to other changes. We're actually going through right now a strategic initiative looking at all of our development rights. You heard a lot of acronyms and terms. That is something that is unique to the Tahoe Basin in terms of what we call our commodities. And we're taking a look at that. We're taking a hard look at that. And I think that there's going to be opportunities through that process. So I'm encouraging, the local governments to get together to suggest what some of those changes might be, learning from folks like Mark and on the other side in terms of what does it take to develop these types of projects. And we can try and promote those changes to our regional plan. However, it's a multifaceted issue. If I had a magic wand and did away with everything TRPA, there would still be issues implementing affordable housing. So we are open. We want to be at the table and obviously look for some solutions. And I think honestly, this TRPA has dipped its toe in housing in the past, and the local governments have made it very clear that they want to empower themselves and provide those solutions. And we're here, sit at the table, and hopefully we can, again, collaboratively develop those options and move ourselves forward.
Absolutely. So we're looking at some good collaboration here, and this happened recently with the Aspens, right? There was do you want to?
Yeah, I'll give the Aspens as an example. The Aspens project is 48 units, so let's just round that to 50. 50 units, if they had required a residential unit of use selling somewhere around 40 and a development right, and we round that to 50, $2.5 million would have been added to the cost of that project. Wouldn't have happened. We barely squeaked that deal in. But what was added was $1.5 million in fees paid to STPUD just to hook up to the project. We had to go to STPUD on behalf of the developer and really argue, could those fees be deferred or waived? And what they did was they split the fee, pay half now, half later, but that fee is still paid. So the government agencies themselves are adding the cost to housing. If we could find solutions and ways to reduce those costs, that would really make a big difference. If you look at a market priced home for those that would be affordable in the workforce side, and you buy a residential unit of use, you're buying a development right and the parcel and all the permitting fees, you're $100,000 into that deal before you start building, which is different than any other community. And so when we add those costs, which is added to the price to home, and as Sarah was pointing out, our incomes are not going to match up for that, it's the government that really has to devise a solution here. And then we look at, of course, we're always going to need to limit somewhat supply because we're not going to just allow lots of units to be built.
Nancy, is there anything we could do that the city could do, for example, as a local jurisdiction to waive fees or pay for the public utility fees?
Well, there would be no sense for one government agency to pay another government agency. That's all the same tax dollars. So taking that cost out altogether, if STPUD and the city and TRPA all waive their fees on housing on a certain price, that would all make sense because taking tax dollars from one entity to another, it's still coming out of the taxpayer's pocket, which in essence is the developer. But yeah, we all could come together. The city doesn't have a lot of development fees on housing comparative to, like, say, hookup fees and so on, but we all can look at opportunities to waive fees, discount fees, or find incentives to build prices or bring the price down. It's a subsidy of one kind or another to market price housing.
Excellent. Just checking in with the audience. How's everybody doing? There's some acronyms being thrown out. We're talking about commodities. Are we tracking? Raise your hand if you're tracking this. We good? All right. Excellent. And thank you, panel, for delivering this in English and acronyms, acronym-free language. So So those are some questions that we really wanted to lay out before we dive into audience Q&A, which we'll move into in just a moment here. We're actually going to end our live stream. So those of you watching at home, you can catch and those of you here, you can catch the entire, this entire town hall event on our TRIPS YouTube channel. We'll also be posting it on our website, on our Facebook channel, and we encourage you to catch the Q&A session online, and then next time, this will be a quarterly event series. You can catch this live at our Tahoe Town Hall events.